Hi, everyone. Happy Notary Public Day. It's Marcy and Vanessa here with Nina. We are so excited to have Melissa Ysaguirre and Amanda O from the New York State Attorney General's office talk to us today about deed theft / deed fraud. Thank you both so much for joining us on Notary Public Day.
Thank you for having us. Very excited to be here, and I'm happy to share today.
So Amanda, let us know if you can't share your screen. You should have the ability to do so. For everyone
Okay.
on the call, we'll take questions, but we're going to hold them till the end. So as we go, if there are questions or scenarios that you want to share, just drop us a little note in the Q&A. And then when we get to the end, we'll take all questions or unmute you so you can share any information that you have. But at this point, I am going to step away and turn this over to Melissa and Amanda.
Can you guys see everything? Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great.
Great. Hi, everyone. So today I'm just going to be presenting and giving you some information on deed theft prevention. And what is deed theft? So deed theft occurs when someone steals the title to someone else's home, either without the homeowner knowing or consenting. And so there are two primary ways that we've seen that happens. That is either through forgery, which would be criminal. And so in the case of forgery, the homeowner has not signed the deed. Instead, someone has either impersonated them or forged the document and filed it with the county clerk, or if you're in New York City, the Office of the City Register. And the second way that we've seen that deed theft also happens is through fraud. And so that is a situation where a homeowner will sign documents that they may not necessarily understand. And unfortunately, in signing those documents, signs away the title to their home. In that type of situation where a homeowner is a victim of deed theft through fraud, most often we see that the homeowner is someone who has been misled by a scammer into thinking that they're going to be receiving some type of assistance and most often that will be with a situation that involves financial distress that's related to the home. So for example, that would be a help in a foreclosure or help with liens that are filed against the property. And so that would be more of a civil matter. And so we've seen that deed theft has been rapidly increasing and on the rise. Our office has been receiving a lot of complaints regarding deed theft or deed fraud. I would say that in the last 10 years, it's become an increasing issue. And most certainly it's becoming an increasing issue since the foreclosure crisis. It's been at times concentrated in New York City, but we are receiving complaints from other parts of the state and know that deed theft is something that is also spreading and occurring in other parts of New York. And so we also have partition scams that are on the rise and increasing. So a partition scam is where the homeowner has passed away, unfortunately, and the heirs to their property have not probated their estate or probated their will. And so the property remains in the name, the deed remains in the name of the deceased homeowner. And in that situation, the scammer will target heirs to the property to purchase a partial interest in the property. Most often that partial interest is purchased from an heir who doesn't live in the property. And at that point, the partition scammer moves to oust or evict the family member or the heir who's still living in the home. And so those are just some of the types of deed theft that we've seen and the types of deed theft that are on the rise. And so the types of homes that are targeted by scammers most often. So most often those are properties in foreclosure. And foreclosure is something that is foreclosure records are publicly available. So if a home is in foreclosure, that information is available to the public. Also homes which are have tax liens or maybe water liens for unpaid water are also targeted by scammers. And like I said, also we have heirs property scams, which are on the rise. So properties where the homeowner has passed away and the deed has not been transferred to the living heirs to the property. And in those types of situations, those homes are being targeted by scammers through the research that they're conducting. They use publicly available documents and also websites like ancestry.com to research the heirs to the properties that they come across. And also abandoned or unkept properties are being targeted as well. Unfortunately, scammers may be looking for properties in a specific neighborhood and will notice a property that's not that's been abandoned or unkept by just driving around or driving by. And we also have found that deed theft disproportionately impacts elderly homeowners, senior citizens, homeowners of color, and then also homeowners who are in rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods. The idea with a deed theft scam is the scammer seeks to basically take advantage of the equity that has accumulated in the property. So oftentimes a scammer may target a property that has been owned by the same family for a specific amount of time, for a very long amount of time. And then also properties that have very little debt on the property. So maybe the mortgage isn't very large, or maybe there is no mortgage on the property. Those are the types of properties that are being targeted by scammers. And so properties that have increased significantly in value in gentrifying neighborhoods are prime targets for scammers. And the scammer's goal in trying to obtain the deed to the property is to transfer it either to themselves or to an LLC or a company that they own. And that often shields the scammer from being able to be identified. They also seek to take out a mortgage on the property after obtaining the deed. So that is a way that they will take advantage of the equity that's accumulated in the property. And by taking out a mortgage on it, obviously they have no intent to pay. They often just walk away with the mortgage proceeds. And the homeowner is, the original homeowner is now stuck with a mortgage on the property that they're unable to pay. And so scammers may also seek to quickly flip and sell the property to another purchaser and create a lot of title issues on the property. And also we see that scammers commence lawsuits against the original homeowner in order to finalize the scam. Unfortunately, that is also something that we have seen has been rapidly increasing. Scammers will commence lawsuits for quiet title, eviction, and also what's called a partition. So an eviction is where obviously the scammer will try to take possession of the property once they obtain the deed. And they will try to evict either the homeowner or the homeowner's tenants in order to either flip the property or make their own rental income from the property. There's also a partition action that a scammer might try to file against the homeowner in court. That is most often in the situation where a partition scammer has purchased a partial interest in what's called heirs property, which is property where the homeowner has passed away, but they haven't transferred the deed to the living heirs. So there may be, you know, multiple people who now have an ownership interest in the home. For example, if mom passes away, and her child, she has two or three children, and they have not probated a will or probated the estate and transferred the deed to the property to themselves, a scammer might come across one of the children and pay for their interest in the property, have that child sign a deed, record that deed against the property, and then start a lawsuit in court for partition, presenting themselves as a partial owner of the property and asking the court to issue a judgment and then sell the home so that the scammer is then able to take advantage of the equity that's accumulated in that home after it sells at auction. There's also quiet title actions that scammers will try to commence against homeowners, essentially asking the court for a judgment, which declares that they are the rightful title owner or owner of the property. And scammers often do that where the homeowner is someone who's vulnerable and does not have a lot of resources that they can, use to defend themselves in court. So scammers may obtain default judgments because homeowners may not understand the court process or understand that they need to defend themselves or answer in court. And so it's just another part of the scam and a way to finalize the scam so that the scammer can secure title to the property and take advantage of selling the property or evicting who lives in there so that they can make a profit off of the scam. So scammers operate by researching public records to find both vulnerable homeowners and vulnerable properties. And so, like I said before, that's often homes that are in foreclosure or that have property tax liens or water liens. Scammers often are able to search public records to find properties that have been owned by the same family for a very long period of time, but they may notice that the last recorded homeowner has passed away and the deed has not been transferred to a living heir. And so that they access public records in order to obtain that information. Scammers also will work in teams in order to make the transaction look legitimate, but we know that it's not. And so a homeowner may be approached or contacted by someone that they think is a trusted party who pulls them into the scam. Unfortunately, sometimes that might be someone of their own community, someone of their own nationality or cultural background, or someone that they have met in a place like, for example, church, where they think that they can, trust this party to help them. Most often, scammers are targeting homeowners who are in financial distress. So when the homeowner is approached by someone that they think is a trusted party, that is often how they get involved with the scammer. And so scammers also work with a team of real estate professionals to make the transaction look legitimate, not only to the homeowner, but later on, possibly to a court if it's ever challenged or if they bring their own eviction, partition, or title action in court. And so the real estate professionals or other licensed professionals that scammers may work with may include attorneys, unfortunately, real estate salespersons or brokers, or other mortgage lenders. And that creates this illusion that this is a legitimate transaction, that it's a legitimate sale. But it also works to isolate the homeowner. A homeowner may not seek out other parties for help. For example, they may not hire their own attorney or their own real estate broker because the scammer has told them, oh, you don't need to hire anyone. You don't need to do anything additional. I will provide you with an attorney, or you don't need an attorney, or I have, a broker that can help you. And so by creating a team and executing the scam in a team, it works to isolate the homeowner so that they don't seek out any additional help from other parties, and also is a way to make the transaction look legitimate, but it really is not. So our office has increased our efforts to combat deed theft through the Protect Our Homes initiative. And that includes public outreach events, presentations like today's presentation. And so for the public, we generally go out into the community, and we try to target communities that have been impacted by foreclosure, or also gentrifying communities, so that we can educate homeowners and other community members about deed theft, indicators of deed theft, what a potential scammer may, the actions that a potential scammer may take. And so we hold those events in the community, in New York City, certainly, and throughout other parts of the state, to just educate members of the public, and also to provide a way for members of the public to seek assistance if they need assistance, or they believe they've been the victim of a deed theft scam. We also fund the Homeowner Protection Program, which is also known as HOP. And that's a network of housing counseling agencies and legal services organizations that provide free legal help to homeowners. And so that free help can include legal representation in a foreclosure action, or housing counseling, so that the homeowner can get free help locating resources. For example, if they need help figuring out how to pay off tax or water liens, or arrears, and also if they need help applying to their bank or their mortgage servicer for a loan modification or some other type of loss mitigation. HOP legal services organizations also will help homeowners who have been victims of deed theft scams. They may do so by representing the homeowner in a lawsuit against the scammer, is also, or just educating the homeowner about their rights in terms of trying to get their title back if they've been the victim of a deed theft scam. Our office also investigates complaints that we receive of deed theft and deed fraud. We do that both criminally and civilly. So we have a real estate enforcement team that prosecutes deed theft in criminal court. We also have a civil team that investigates deed fraud, if the allegations made by the complainant fit more of a more into civil rather than criminal. So our office has jurisdiction to bring our own civil actions if we have find that a scammer has been engaged in a pattern of deed fraud, or a pattern of illegality. And we also are able to use new laws that have been passed this year and last year to not only prosecute deed theft, but also if there is a eviction proceeding, or there's a partition proceeding that affects the deed or the title to a property, or if there is a proceeding which affects the possession of the property, and our office is investigating a deed fraud or a deed theft that involves that property as well, the law allows us to make a motion before the court to stay or halt that eviction proceeding or that partition sale while we investigate the complaint. So that's a new law that's been recently passed, which is great for, not only our office if we're investigating, but also helps things remain within the status quo for the victim and the homeowner. And so I'm just going to share some indicators of deed fraud or deed theft. Maybe these are kind of like alarm bells for you if you are at a closing and you may notice some of these things. They may be indicators that the transaction is one that involves deed fraud. And so a telltale sign of deed theft is the seller does not have an attorney, or they have met their attorney for the first time at closing. That is very typical of deed fraud. Again, because part of the scheme is that the seller or the homeowner does not have their own attorney. They have not hired their own attorney because they've been told by the scammer that they either don't need to, or that one will be provided for them. Unfortunately, because scammers work with a team, most often they will have an attorney that they work with who will be possibly at a closing for the purpose of representing the homeowner or the seller. But often this attorney has not actually, had a retainer agreement or met the homeowner prior to closing or explained the transaction to the homeowner at all. And often what happens if it is a deed fraud is that if there's an attorney that's been provided by the scammer for the purpose of representing, or at least on paper for the purpose of representing the homeowner, then that attorney probably has only met the homeowner at closing. Another sign is the closing might be rushed or scheduled at the last minute. The goal, obviously, with the scam is to have the homeowner sign documents that they don't understand. And so the homeowner may be rushed through signing documents. Another sign is that the closing is not held at an attorney's office. So in a lot of deed theft or deed fraud scams, the scammer is not a licensed real estate person. They are not, they have no licenses. In fact, most often they are just trying to engage in the buying and selling of real estate or real property. And they try to set themselves up to appear as a legitimate business. And so they may have their own office where they are holding closings. And so sometimes there's an attorney present, sometimes there's not an attorney present, but often the closing is not held at an attorney's office. It is held at the office that belongs to the scammer, unfortunately. And during that closing and at that office, another sign is that none of the documents are being explained to the seller or really reviewed by the seller at all. The seller might appear, or the homeowner might appear confused when signing documents. And like I said earlier, will most likely be rushed through the signing of documents. Another telltale sign of deed fraud is the purchase price for the property is very, very low. We know that New York real estate is very valuable, even if it's not in the greatest condition, especially in New York City and in the 5 boroughs of New York City. And so a sign of deed fraud is a home that's being purchased for a very, very low purchase price. As an example, with a heirs partition scam, most often the partial interest that the scammer is purchasing from the heir to the property, and most often that's an heir who doesn't live in the house, will be purchased for $3,000 to $5,000. So there are circumstances in which a deed is being executed by an heir to a property for a partial interest in that home, and they're only being paid $3,000 to $5,000 at the time of executing that deed or at the time of closing. And so that's a telltale sign that it may be a partition scam or a deed fraud scam, because the purchase price for the property in no way reflects the value, the actual value of the property. There may also be a non-traditional lending or lender that's involved, a hard money lender. What we've seen often is a homeowner signing away the deed to their property, not understanding that that's what they're doing. And then in addition to that, the purchaser, who is obviously the scammer, in order to finance this purchase, because it may include paying off some liens, it may include paying off a small mortgage or a mortgage that is small as it relates to the value of the property. The scammer will obtain a loan from a non-traditional lender, a lender that might also be an LLC. And often it's a hard money loan, a balloon note or loan that comes to maturity in 12 months. And the goal there is to obtain those loan proceeds and and divert them away from the homeowner, away from the who would be the seller at closing, and to walk away with the loan proceeds. And also during a closing, another sign is that a seller may make reference to a reconveyance of the property. So often a seller or homeowner is told that they will receive financial assistance, for example, refinancing, and all they need to do is sign over the deed to someone else or to an LLC for a temporary period of time, and then the home will be transferred back to them. So at closing, the seller may mention that, or the homeowner may bring that up. So that's also almost always a scam. And the homeowner in that circumstance doesn't realize that they will not actually get the title to the home back. And the last one here is, a sign of a heir scam is that the deed is being executed by someone who is heir to the estate, and that the deed is for just a partial interest in the home versus all heirs to the estate selling 100% interest in the home. Another indicator may be that there's no licensed realtors involved in the transaction who are being paid a commission. There's no title insurance being purchased by the buyer. If the buyer, obviously is a scammer, it's most often the case they will not really be able to obtain title insurance because this is not a legitimate purchase. There will be no inspection involved in the transaction because the scammer does not really care much about the condition of the property. They just want to get a hold of the deed so that they can either mortgage the property, flip the property, or force a sale of the property. In certain circumstances, the seller will have a different address than the property address. That's most often in a heirs partition scam because the heir to the property or the person who's selling their interest in the property doesn't actually live there. Another really telltale sign of a deed theft scam is that the buyer is an LLC and the name of the LLC is just basically the address of the property, and an LLC that's only been created for the purpose of this closing and obtaining the deed to the property that's being transferred. And of course, other signs are that the seller, who's the homeowner, doesn't really end up receiving any money or consideration from the transaction or the transfer of the deed. In certain circumstances, the homeowner may not speak English and there's no one translating at closing for them. And then in other circumstances, we've seen that homeowners are provided with personal checks or uncertified funds at closing. So those are just some of the things that we see that are common signs of transactions or transfers of property that involve deed fraud or deed theft. I think most often the best rule of thumb really is just to follow the law. So if you are notarizing documents for a closing, it's best to obviously always verify the identity of the person who's signing, the identity of the seller or the homeowner by, obtaining a government issued ID, and then also to keep a log or a journal of every document that's notarized, the type of document, the date, the person who signed, because that would be the best record if this issue comes up again, if there's an issue that comes up with the closing. And so what to do if someone is a victim of deed theft, or if you think there has been a transaction, a closing, something like that, where deed theft has been involved. So you can immediately report it either to the district attorney in the county where the property is located, or our office, the Office of the Attorney General, for investigation. The victim should also contact their own attorney or the HOP network And that is for the purpose of understanding what their rights, options, and claims would be if they did actually end up being a victim of deed theft and has lost the title to their home. And then if there is an eviction that is occurring, the homeowner should ask the judge to have a temporary stay of that eviction for 90 days so that they can file their own claim in court to challenge the transfer of the deed. And some resources here to contact. So our office has a hotline for reporting deed theft, or you can also file a complaint on our website, and you can just file the complaint form and fill out the complaint form for electronic submission. Or if you have any concerns or want to report something that you think may have been deed theft or deed fraud, we also have an email address specifically for that purpose, which is deedtheft@ag.ny.gov. I also have the HOP network information here. And again, that's for homeowners who need either housing counseling or legal help as it relates to their home being in any kind of distress. And also, you can, if there's been an incident of deed fraud or deed theft, that can be reported to the sheriff's department or the district attorney for the county in which the property is located. And obviously the district attorney's office investigates deed fraud on a criminal basis. And our office, like I said earlier, takes complaints of any type of deed theft or deed fraud, and that can be something that may be criminal or may be investigated civilly as well. So thank you very much for your attention and for having me. And I'm happy to take questions.
You can unmute you, or you can drop a question in the Q&A. I want to ask a couple questions myself here. So I love that you brought up the journal piece. As you probably know, journal requirements were enacted in the Iran law that came out 2 years ago, and we were very happy to see that as notaries, those of us who had already been keeping a journal, it was nice to know that everyone was required to as well. But I'm sure you probably know that the legislation recently passed, a bill saying they would like the journal requirements to be removed. What is your thought on that? We feel as though that is a deterrent to deed fraud, and it's helpful if there should be an investigation. Have you found that to be true? Have you had to go back and ask a notary for a journal, or has that come into any of your investigations so far?
Yeah, so I will say when we investigate a complaint of deed theft or deed fraud, and again, that can be forgery. So sometimes there's impersonation. And so that's why it's really important to verify the identification and to only notarize if the person is appearing before you, right? And then with the journal, if it's a question of a deed fraud because the person was tricked or there was an orchestrated scheme by, a group of people, we do ask for during that investigation for the notary's journal so that we can double check, did this notary that appears on this document actually notarize this document? Which documents that are included in the closing documents, which ones did they notarize? And then who appeared before them, who signed, dates. We do ask for the journal. So I would say it's really, really important to keep that journal, not only for yourself as a notary, but in case that transaction is later challenged, complained about, you want to be able to refer back, because obviously you're not going to remember everything or every person, and you may end up being asked for information, testimony, so you really want to keep those records for yourself.
Great. You said something was interesting. We've, in the past really heard about deed fraud in the city, right? Downstate in the 5 boroughs. It's kind of where it's been. But you said something that was really interesting to me. You said we're starting to see that more outside of the city, because where I am, upstate Western New York, we we always say, well, it's not really a problem here, but it sounds like it's starting to become a problem everywhere. Is that correct?
It is starting to become a problem everywhere, and unfortunately, the scammers are coming up with new ways to execute real estate scams. It's unfortunately something that's profitable for them. In certain circumstances, it's very low upfront cost and very big gain at the end if they're actually able to successfully execute the scam. And so it is spreading. We have had events and complaints from Long Island, from upstate. There are now vacant land attempts to also, obtain title to vacant land upstate. And so, it is spreading across the state, and it's an ongoing issue. And while there may be a huge concentration of deed theft in the 5 boroughs, because residential real property in the 5 boroughs here in New York City is very valuable. And so there's a huge concentration in the city, but we are seeing that scammers are going outside of the city to places where people are less aware, less educated about deed fraud, and trying to execute scams that way as well.
Great. So I'd like to ask this, and maybe you haven't seen it yet, but in other states, we're hearing more about deed fraud and deed theft with the use of remote online notarization, where sellers are, overseas or someplace else. They say, hey, I can't come to closing. I'm really sorry. Can we do this remotely? Have we seen any of that in New York yet? I mean, our law is fairly new for that, but certainly it isn't in other states. Has that come across your desk at all?
There have been instances in which people are actually located, in other countries. Like, they're not living in the home, they're not living in New York. I would say that might be something that is maybe more common for like vacant land or for an heirs scam, because the person who has an ownership interest in the property is not living in the property, right? Or is not, they're not in physical possession of the property. They're located somewhere else. And so with those types of scams, the scammers are resourceful. They get in contact with people or have people impersonate the actual, owner, and get someone to execute a deed. And so we've had that type of circumstance as well. I have not received any complaints as of yet that involve a scam where the person who executed the deed did it through a remote notarization. So that has not, my office, I'm not aware that we personally received that, but it is something that I can contemplate can be an issue. And so that's why it's like really important, obviously, to keep records and follow the law as you're, notarizing documents.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask, or any scenarios? Oh, I have Ms. Cheryl Kinch who said something. There was a real case in the news about a family in Bedford that is in litigation for years with the scammer who paid one of the family members who lived in another country for his share of the property. The scammer hopes to proceed with a partition.
Yeah. So that's the exact type of scenario I was trying to explain earlier, which is where the homeowner has passed away. Sometimes it can be like 10 years or more that the family, some of the family members, child, grandchildren are still living in the house, but no one has taken the steps to, properly probate the will or the estate in surrogate's court, and then have a new deed filed on the property showing that the property belongs to whoever the heir might be. That might be the child of the original owner, the grandchild, spouse, whatever. And so in that circumstance, in that neighborhood, the properties are very valuable. And so in those types of circumstances also, a lot of times there's like no mortgage on the property because it's been owned by the family for so long and they bought it a long time ago when it wasn't very expensive, when the property itself wasn't very expensive to purchase. And so, yeah, so then, you know, the scammer will come across this property. They will notice that because obviously we know the property records are publicly available. They're publicly accessible. And they will do some online research or other research trying to figure out who the heirs to the property could be. And then also through public records, trying to locate those heirs by either calling them, showing up to their addresses in person. Scammers will hire people to travel to find the heirs to the property, and meet with those heirs in person. And so, they will go through a lot of effort to obtain an interest in the property. And once they do that and they have the heir or someone who in certain, you know, certain circumstances might impersonate the heir to sign the deed, they then have that closing, they then record that deed. And then once that deed is recorded, they move to go to court to do what's called a partition action, which is to ask the court to force a sale of the property because now they have an ownership interest in the property. And of course, partition is because, you know, a house cannot literally be split in half. So we have to force a sale of the house because there are two disinterested parties who own the home. They don't live there together. They're not interested in keeping the home jointly held. So that is a scam and that is on the rise. And it's, you know, unfortunately, just the way that property ownership transfers upon death has made it, has created a vulnerability there and has made it a scam that, you know, fraudsters are putting a lot of energy into executing because they believe that they can make a good profit at the end.
Scary stuff going on out there. Someone asked about the notary bill to remove the journal requirement. So that has not been delivered to the governor yet. Everyone who's on. We are for keeping the journal requirements. If you go onto our website, we have a legislation page. We actually sent a packet off to the governor. It includes letters from Notaries, the National Notary Association, the American Society of Notaries, the New York City Bar Association. We are all huge proponents, experts across the country that lended their hand. We are proponents in journal requirements, and I'm going to reiterate this. It is for your protection as a notary, in that you know, notaries are almost always called into these types of things because we were the one at the execution of the document typically, right? So it's important for you, just like Melissa said. I don't remember a notarization I might have done 2, 3, 5 years ago. I barely remember a notarization I did yesterday if I'm a full-time notary. It protects you and that you've got that information, and it protects the consumer. So if there was some sort of forgery and they weren't the one who signed, you know, you have some sort of validation of that. It protects everyone involved in this chain, right? Attorneys should want it. It helps them litigate their cases. Obviously, the Attorney General's office wants it because it helps them in their investigation. So no matter what happens with this notary journal bill, I'm sorry, I'm on my soapbox, please, please, please still consider keeping a notary journal. It's so crucial to everyone involved in the transaction. Any other questions out there? All right. Melissa and Amanda, thank you so much for coming today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it and how wonderful this information was. We recorded it. We're going to throw it on our YouTube channel. We're going to make sure that everyone knows. Thank you again so much for joining us on Notary Public Day.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.